Hello, I'm Esther Blakely. Fond du Lac County, the gathering place, began when I was president of the Fond du Lac County Historical Society.
And I'm Howard Bluell. As the current president, I'm happy to continue support of this important project. Since its founding in 1948, the Fond du Lac County Historical Society has been dedicated to preserving the treasures of the past and educating residents and visitors on our exciting history. And now we invite you to sit back and enjoy this journey through the history of our county.
A gathering place unlike any other.
Wherever there's place, there must be a center. Cheyenne prophets say that the place will be found in the Midwest. I am seeking center.
Perhaps the eye of man has never rested upon a spot of earth which for beauty, fertility, health, and convenience was better calculated to meet his wants and supply his necessities, since shut out from the primeval garden.
Landscapes formed by glaciers thousands of years ago. The result? A place now known as Fond du Lac County, a birthplace of rivers.
The most distinctive landform in Fond du Lac County is the Niagara Escarpment, locally known as the Ledge. And early on it became the dividing line for two distinct biological or vegetational communities. And it was from this dividing line that Fond du Lac County gives rise to more streams and rivers than any other county in the state of Wisconsin.
The glaciers created Lake Winnebago, one of the nation's largest freshwater inland lakes. Valuable marshlands are another of the gifts left by the glaciers. Waterways served as passport to the undiscovered territory, land bountiful and beautiful and full of promise. Near the end of the Ice Age, 12,000 years ago, Fond du Lac County welcomed its first inhabitants.
The earliest inhabitants of Fond du Lac County were most certainly the Paleo-Indians, the actual mammoth hunters. And then 9 and 10 years ago, we actually excavated mammoth remains right over by the El Dorado Marsh. And that was animal number 4 that's been found there. So not only do we have the animals, but we also have evidence of the hunters. Many of the early trails probably really originated as mammoth migratory routes, and they would have been widened into human footpaths by the hunters following the mammoths. They eventually became things like the right-of-way for the Milwaukee Road Railroad, which following the exact course of really what was the military road. Highway 151 to Waupun was a trail. Highway 45 to Milwaukee was a trail. Highway 151 coming all the way down the East Shore Lake Winnebago was a trail. So they became very, very prominent in the early settlement. We're still enjoying them today.
Waterways made Fond du Lac County a gathering place for the Native American nations. Winnebago tribal councils were held on the eastern shore of the lake. Menominee, Potawatomi, Chippewa, Ottawa, Sac, and Fox also called the region their home. Native Americans opened the land to future settlers. The groundwork was laid. Indian villages often became trading posts, towns, cities. Native Americans were the county's first teachers, guiding settlers through the unknown. An environment so full of promise,
so full of life,
where waters carried the weary, the adventurous, and the determined to a new frontier.
a gathering place unlike any other.
We arrived abruptly at the shores of a circular lake, which I found to be Lake
Railroads
Winnebago.
were critical to the development of Fond du Lac County.
Every one of the color guards were wounded
but we kept the flag floating.
An automobile, the first one, was quite an event in our
She
life.
became Susan B. Anthony's handpicked
It is the
successor.
Depression years, when people have little money to spend.
I always felt that I had to serve my country.
The environment of green space is being drastically
We
used
want
up.
to retain our heritage and our ancestry and our roots.
He purchased land in many sections of the territory, including
Water highways led to Fond du Lac County, the gathering place for those in search of fur, a major industry. The first fur traders to set foot on this new soil were East Coast Native Americans. Here they met the Winnebago. The French too came in search of the valuable fur. Traveling with them were Christian missionaries. These early travelers made maps which provided a guide for other fur traders and opened the way to settlement.
With very few exceptions, the French related to the American Indians surprisingly well. They mastered their native languages, they fit in comfortably to their lifestyles, and they even intermarried with the Native Americans. A telling point, I think, is the fact that the French continued to successfully trade with the Native Americans after the British in 1763 had taken control of the upper Midwest.
The first recorded trading post in Fond du Lac County was founded in 1787, or perhaps even earlier. Following the American Revolution, the newly formed United States claimed the Northwest Territory. In 1787, Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance.
The Northwest Land Ordinance remains as one of the most important pieces of legislation in the entire history of the United States. But it was particularly important to the development of Wisconsin. It literally made Wisconsin possible. This ordinance also required that there be freedom of religion, and that there be no slavery, and that provisions be made for monies for common schools. I think it can be easily seen, too, that this ordinance helped encourage immigration into the Northwest Territory and ultimately into Wisconsin itself.
In order to establish control of this newly won land, the United States government built forts at Prairie du Chien, Portage, and Green Bay. Having traveled extensively on an inspection of these forts, one soldier wrote,
After a toilsome march of 8 or 9 hours, we arrived abruptly at the shores of a circular lake, which I found to be Lake Winnebago. I never experienced a more grateful transition than from the dampened and tangled wood to the sunny margin of this beautiful water.
Many came to Wisconsin for adventure, opportunity, power. Others had different reasons.
When the Brothertown tribe was in New York, the non-Indians felt as though they needed to own the land, and of course the Indian feeling was that no one owned the land, they could share it. It was for everybody.
New settlers put up fences, a signal to the Brothertown, Oneida, and Stockbridge that they would be forced to move.
The Brothertowns purchased 23,000 acres in Kaukauna. Then there was a deal that was made that the land would be changed over to the east shores of Lake Winnebago, and they started coming in 1831.
Here we went. Oxen, cows, mules, horses, coaches, carriages.
In 1835 and 36, a military road linking Forts Crawford, Winnebago, and Howard was built by the United States Army 5th Regiment. Although rough, the road was the first to be open year-round to Fond du Lac County.
A nation on wheels, an empire in the commotion and pangs of birth.
An original section of this road still exists near Ladoga in the town of Springvale. Colwart E. and Fanna Pyre traveled from Green Bay to become the county's first non-Native American settlers in June of 1836. the year Fond du Lac became a county. The Pyers worked for the Fond du Lac Land Company, operating a trading and land sale house. In an 1836 letter to his brother in Green Bay, Colwert wrote of their struggles.
I must tell you a wolf story. I believe I had killed 2 when you were here about 4 weeks ago. I shot one and wounded him slightly. My dog came up to him before he got to the woods when a severe battle ensued. The dog did his best, and the wolf fought like a hero. I attempted to assist the dog, and in the scramble, the wolf caught me by the right hand and held it until I choked him sometime. With the other one, at length, I got my hand at liberty and drew my jackknife.
The Pyers traded with their neighbors, the Brothertown Indians, who helped build their home. Territorial Judge James Doty was an officer in the land company that hired the Pyers. Realizing the potential, he purchased land in many sections of the territory, including Fond du Lac and Techita, where he built a home in 1839. Doty was one of the great land speculators of Wisconsin, and Wisconsin government continued to be influenced by Fond du Lac County leaders. Doty, who left his mark during his short stay in Fond du Lac County. Nathaniel Talmadge, a former U.S. Senator from New York. Alexander Stowe, a lawyer from Techita. And Samuel Beal, a framer of the Wisconsin Constitution. News of Fond du Lac County continued to spread.
Dear friends, I am glad to hear you are pleased with the country. I shall come there as soon as I can. I want to see you all very much. Luther Batchelor.
Well, I'll be. It says here that Philadelphia passengers can board a train every morning at the corner of Board and Arch Streets and get to Pittsburgh in 2.5 days.
My. But here, no, it'll never happen.
"21 townships were formed from 1836 to 1852. New settlement threatened the future of the Native Americans. Menominee and Winnebago, who called the region their home, were forced to negotiate a series of treaties that sent them to other parts of the state. The fate of the brother town would follow a different course.
The Brothertown tribe lost their tribal status in 1839, and the state gave them the opportunity to become citizens instead of moving from Wisconsin to Kansas. And so they figured that that's what they wanted to do because they wanted to stay where they were. They had just moved from New York.
The Brothertown would come to regret their decision, but in the early days of settlement, they played a vital role in the community. One of the first grist mills in the area was built and run by the Brothertown. Grist mills for grinding flour were essential to frontier life. Fond du Lac County offered opportunities for settlers with diverse ethnic backgrounds and for experimental communities like the Wisconsin Phalanx.
It was quite radically different from anything that had ever been tried before. It had communal elements, even though, strictly speaking, it was not socialistic. They started their settlement in 1844, and they lasted until 1851. The leader of the organization was a man by the name of Warren Chase, who had advocated just about every reform movement that was then current, from abolition to women's rights.
German settlers were lured to Fond du Lac County by the descriptive writings of Dr. Carl de Haas, who settled in the town of Marshfield. Immigrants were seeking many kinds of freedoms, religion for one, and that quest resulted in the formation of churches throughout the county, like the church in Dundee, built in a day.
A preacher came along and wanted to know if there was any building which could be used for a meeting. 2 local men said there was none, but suggested that one could be built immediately. Knight saw the whole structure complete, and the meeting was held.
In addition to freedom of religion, settlers demonstrated their belief in education. By 1854, Fond du Lac County had 118 grade schools and several schools of higher education. the stagecoach became a familiar sight. The rest stops every 5 miles became post offices, settlements, and often villages. The wheels of commerce turned quickly. Banks, businesses, and newspapers spread the word. The Fond du Lac Journal in 1846, the Ripon Herald in 1853, and the Waupun Times in 1857. Agriculture prospered. Farmers broke the fertile sod to grow abundant crops of wheat. With its many waterways, the county was ideal for water-powered mills. Steamboats on Lake Winnebago provided seasonal transportation.
But the train of thought was now shifting to a more advanced form of travel.
Railroads were critical to the development of Fond du Lac County. Railroad history also is complex and controversial, and on occasions, farmers who invested in developing railroad companies lost money when the railroads did not succeed. Railroads determined where villages would be created and whether they would prosper or die.
It took flamboyant entrepreneur John Macy to bring the railroad to Fond du Lac County. He started and promoted the Rock River Valley Union Railroad, one of the earliest in Wisconsin. On a return journey from the east in 1856, Macy met an untimely death when the steamer Niagara caught fire on Lake Michigan. Despite his death, Macy's dream of train travel did succeed. And the gathering place of waterways now became the gathering place for railroad travel. The country, however, was running on a much different track. A developing nation was becoming a divided nation. All aboard!
And for these particular passengers, the ride was just beginning.
The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, with the firing on Fort Sumter. But there were many earlier rumblings of war in Fond du Lac County, beginning with the strong anti-slavery movement.
The abolitionist heritage of Fond du Lac County really did come from immigrants. Immigrants from the East Coast, American Indian immigrants who came, albeit unwillingly, from the East Coast as well. Many of the European immigrants also were abolitionists.
There is evidence that some Fond du Lac County abolitionists carried their cause one step farther, as conductors of the Underground Railway.
Wisconsin was sort of a refuge for the fugitive slave, and my father kept an underground station. Many a night I have slept out on the prairie with some runaway slaves, with father and the neighbors protecting them against the U.S. Marshal.
The anti-slavery movement reached fever pitch in 1854 with the introduction into the Congress of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Meetings of protest were held all over the northern states and all over Fond du Lac County. There was nothing particularly unusual about the meeting in Ripon, except that there they advocated the formation of a new political party to deal with this issue. And they decided that the best name for this party would be Republican.
Fond du Lac County played a pivotal role in freeing from jail Sherman Booth, a leading Wisconsin abolitionist who defied the fugitive slave law.
So a group of people from the western part of Fond du Lac County went down to Milwaukee in the summer of 1860 and broke Booth out of jail. When Booth attempted to speak in Ripon, the federal marshals tried to re-arrest him, but were violently removed from the hall, and Booth was spirited away. But this demonstrates the intensity of feeling on this question. It's right on the eve of the outbreak of the Civil War, you see, and you can almost see it as a part of the Civil War. Fond du Lac County would seem to be at war against the federal government.
When news reached Fond du Lac County that the Civil War had started, immediately mass meetings were held all across the county. Citizens rallied in support of the war, support with money and volunteers. The soldiers left in optimism and in the expectation that the conflict would soon be over. But war is seldom beautiful, and this one did not end soon. It drug on for years.
The Civil War brought to national prominence one of Fond du Lac County's citizen soldiers.
Edward Bragg was a man of many achievements. In 1861, when word reached Fond du Lac that Fort Sumter had been fired upon, General Bragg raised his own company called Bragg's Rifles.
Bragg went on to command the 6th Wisconsin Infantry and finally the famed Iron Brigade.
As the war continued, it became necessary to turn to the draft. There were 4 drafts during the war. It was not unusual to have substitutes. As the war wore on, those who were drafted and didn't want to serve could purchase someone else to serve in their place, and this was increasingly done.
As the war dragged on, the losses were deeply felt on the Fond du Lac County home front.
Many of Fond du Lac's families suffered greatly during the war. Many of the mothers had to return to work. Many of them had never worked in the fields before. Many of them had to raise families alone.
Everyone in Fond du Lac County was hungry for news of the war. Letters from soldiers to family members were the most welcome of all.
The colors of the regiment are pierced with many balls, and 5 rifle bullets passed through the standard. Every one of the color guards were wounded, but we kept the flag floating.
Fond du Lac County was home to 3 regiments, the 3rd and the 14th at Fond du Lac, and the Wisconsin 1st Cavalry at Ripon.
Fond du Lac County suffered many casualties during the Civil War. There wasn't a home left untouched by the vacant chair.
The tide turned for the Union Army, and after nearly 4 years of bitter fighting, the war ended.
April 28, 1865. Tell grandmother to cheer up, for the dark clouds that have so long o'ershadowed our country, blightening the hopes and happiness of the northern people, have been swept away as by magic, and the bright blue sky, plainly visible in the distance. Must close in great haste, hoping soon to grasp you all by the hand. I remain as ever, your unworthy son, J.G.B. Palmer.
Much like a pebble cast into water, the impact of war ripples outward, touching more than its intended target. One target, new industry. By the late 1850s, both sawmills and shingle mills were a common sight around the county's waterways. Expanding industry and agriculture created a need for more modern equipment. In 1859, the Novelty Iron Works was started in the city of Fond du Lac to repair this new farm and mill equipment. Newspapers linked Fond du Lac County citizens with their communities and the outside world. Carriages and wagons were manufactured in every community. Windmills designed and built in Waupun were used throughout the United States. Quarries and lime kilns supplied building materials. With men gone to war, women and children went to work in these new industries. Brockway College was forced to close briefly, but reopened to become Ripon College.
When they finally got going as a college, the war had started. This is 1863, so there were no men available. They were all in the service. So the first class that entered was made up of 4 women.
A new kind of immigrant appeared when in 1862, Fond du Lac County became home to many former Alabama slaves.
These people, including one 15-year-old girl named Frances Shirley, settled in Fond du Lac, received employment, and some stayed, like Frances Shirley and her husband and children, and became the nucleus of a small African-American community in Fond du Lac.
Life for the African Americans centered around their church, which they built in 1868. To raise money for this church, they sponsored dinners, inviting the white people. Music was always a part of their celebrations. They also had debates at the local Armory E and charged admission.
Many wheat farmers headed west, but a different kind of farmer remained. In 1864, a man from the town of Springvale revolutionized the dairy industry by opening the first neighborhood cheese factory in Wisconsin.
Chester Hazen was a great cheesemaker, and he could produce a very high quality product, and he was able to market that not only in Milwaukee and Chicago, but out east in New York, and that kind of broke the ice for Wisconsin dairy producers to really start to become a dairy state.
Critics called his cheese factory Hazen's Folly, but cheese factories began to appear at neighborhood crossroads in every township. With the war now behind them, the county could focus on more productive matters: life, liberty, and politics.
The political climate in Fond du Lac County at this time was interesting. Fond du Lac County was overwhelmingly associated with the Democratic Party. Now, after the birth of the Republican Party, both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, sent officials to the local and county offices. Yet the Democrats still remained as the majority.
As the county's leading Democrat, General Edward S. Bragg was elected to the state Senate in 1869 and went on to serve as a member of the United States Congress from 1877 to 1887.
In 1876, the nation celebrated its 100th birthday. It was a time of reflection.
But it was a time for celebration. In fact, Fond du Lac County threw a party of its own. Why, everybody in the county found a way to celebrate.
As the centennial celebrations came to an end, the county would find itself pondering the challenges, changes, and marvels that would
surprise them. Next.
The Industrial Revolution brought changes that would challenge the growing community. The labor movement in Fond du Lac County developed in the 1870s. One of the first incidents of labor unrest was by workers of the Myers Manufacturing Company, who complained of earning only 50 cents per day in 1877. Farming continued to dominate the county's economy, and the steam engine and threshing machines were a high point of harvest time.
Neighbors all got together. Every neighbor helped the other neighbor. You all worked together. And the ladies were just as proud of the big meal they could serve as the neighbors were willing to work together to thrash the grain.
When they did the thrashing, they had a steam engine and a thrash machine. And when they would be coming down the road and blowing their whistle, all the children would run to the road and wait for it to go by.
The Industrial Revolution also brought to light social problems of the New Age.
The Women's Christian Temperance Union gave women in small communities a positive voice for change. The WCTU addressed some serious problems of drinking as it affected families' lives. It was particularly active in communities that supported prohibition. Fond du Lac, Brandon, Waupun, and Ripon, for example.
Women also continued to campaign for full suffrage. In 1886, a suffrage convention was held in Ripon. Women wanted the right to vote, and women were working in many fields.
The Pire women of Fond du Lac were quite remarkable women and very dramatic examples of the changing roles of women at that time in the late 19th century. The mother, Kate Pire, ran a very successful real estate business in Fond du Lac. And when her eldest daughter decided that she wanted to go to Madison to get a law degree, her mother decided that she would go with her as a chaperone and at the same time get a law degree for herself as well. Both mother and daughter got their law degrees in 1887. They were soon followed by the two other daughters, and the four Pire women ended up having a very successful law practice in Milwaukee.
And then there were those wonderful new inventions: gas lamps, electricity, telephones. By 1883, the city of Fond du Lac had the first electric street lighting system in the state. In spite of these marvels, it was still a 3-mile-an-hour world.
In those younger days, my father owned horses and a sleigh, plus the wagon in the summertime, and he'd have to go into Fond du Lac to get supplies for his business, and a good many a time, we children, not all at one time, but would go along and enjoyed the ride into the city. And in the winter time, we'd get all bundled up, which was fun too, to go with the sleigh.
Nothing made more of an impact on early transportation than the introduction of the automobile. Henry and Otto Abel ran a repair shop and built one of the earliest automobiles found in Fond du Lac County in 1901. Entertainment and cultural activities thrived through local societies. Pianos, victrolas, and other musical instruments could be found in many of the county's parlors. Public theaters booked well-known performers who brought to life the music, drama, and art of the world. The landscapes of Fond du Lac County, immortalized for decades by artist Mark Harrison, would capture the eye of a new artist in 1896, Owen Grommy. Signs of a changing society were everywhere, changes that would play an increasing role in the lives of Fond du Lac County citizens.
These dramatic changes linked Fond du Lac County to its neighbors, the state, the nation, and the world.
A most vital link, for another war was brewing, and at this time it would take place on foreign soil.
July 20th, 1917, America calls her youth to war. Between 1917 and 1918, more than 3,500 county men served in World War I. Women enlisted as nurses, ambulance drivers, and military staff. And if one battle was not enough, the nation was hit by an unseen enemy, an influenza epidemic that killed thousands of soldiers and civilians. On the Fond du Lac County home front, citizens were challenged with shortages of sugar, flour, coffee, and other staples. With a high percent of citizens of German ancestry, Fond du Lac County rode the wave of anti-German sentiment that forced many to choose between the fatherland and the new land. The roster of soldiers shows that many chose the new land. Every school in the county participated in the war effort.
I was about 6 years old when I was walking home from my little country schoolhouse, and on my way home I could hear bells. I heard the church bells, and when I got home there was a group of ladies there who were there to fold bandages for the war effort, but they were laughing and they were half crying and they were so excited. And my mother came over to me, put her arms around me, and she said, "Irma, that horrible war has ended."
At the end of the war in 1918, each Fond du Lac County soldier was awarded a special medal commissioned by the county.
Mother mends my socks and shirt. Mother mends my coat. Maybe she could mend some laws if she had the vote.
Carrie Chapman Catt was born in 1859 on a farm near Ripon. She became Susan B. Anthony's hand-picked successor to succeed her when Anthony retired near the end of the 19th century to lead the fight, to continue the fight for votes for women, which finally occurred in 1920. And that was a victory that would not have occurred without Carrie Chapman Catt's leadership.
Catt went on to found the League of Women Voters and became an advocate for international peace. Prohibition, outlawing the sale and use of alcohol, became a federal law in 1919.
From the very beginning of Wisconsin statehood, prohibition was an important issue. Fond du Lac County, with its strong German component, made for an interesting situation with the Prohibition movement and the activities of the Anti-Saloon League and the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Thus, the Prohibition movement and Prohibition had an important social and economic impact on the county. For example, farmers who raised barley for the many breweries had to find alternative crops.
Prohibition outraged so many of the traditionally Democratic voters in Fond du Lac County that they switched their support to Republican candidates, a voting trend that has continued. Like other eras, the 1920s held its share of troubled times. The Ku Klux Klan found followers in Fond du Lac County, and the days of the small African-American community that had found refuge in Fond du Lac County during the Civil War came to a close.
The African Americans left Fond du Lac when in 1927 their church was sold for $1. This was under questionable circumstances. A few remained in Fond du Lac, marrying into the rest of the population. Mrs. Shirley, the very last of the ex-slaves, died at 98 years old in 1943.
But the 1920s were also a time to forget war. It was the Roaring Twenties, and the prescribed medicine? Diversion, and plenty of it.
Living on the farm, we didn't really get to see many movies downtown, but I did have a cousin who lived in the city, and sometimes I stayed with her, and we would go to the movies. They were black and white, of course, in those days, and I don't remember anything really specific about them, but I do remember later when the sound came in. I remember Al Jolson singing Mammy, and I remember how the people coming out of that theater had tears in their eyes. I thought that was very impressive. Getting an automobile, the first one, was quite the event in our life, and the name of it was a Saxon, and we thought it was just wonderful because it had a top that folded back, it had side curtains and fenders and running board, and my mother learned to drive right away.
Local industrialist Clarence Shaler made his fortune by inventing a tire patch to solve the frequent problem of the early automobile. With the advent of radio, families could stay at home for their entertainment. KFIZ, which began broadcasting from Fond du Lac as an experimental radio station in 1922, was one of the earliest in the Midwest. Another way to get your spirits soaring was in the cockpit of an airplane. From barnstorming to the delivery of the mail, flying became a local passion for test pilot, designer, and teacher Steve Whitman, a resident from the town of Byron who soon became a world-renowned aviator. Sentiment was flying high, but nothing could prepare the nation and the county for the crash that was about to take place.
We were a poor family, and my father got killed when I was 4 years old. So there was no money to lose in the stock market.
My sister and I had been working down in Milwaukee at the St. Benedict Mission, and when the pastor came and gave us our checks, he said, go right away and have them cashed, but he didn't tell us why. So we all jotted over and got our money, and then that evening the banks closed.
The Depression years were a sad time for us. The times that I remember, the saddest time that I remember is the time that we had oatmeal to eat 3 times a day, and the third time my mother didn't eat because there wouldn't be enough for all of us, she didn't think.
In those days, there were neighborhood grocers, and they had charge accounts then. And of course, Dad lost a lot of money during that, so he had to go out and get a second job.
I was not able to go to high school after I finished 8th grade because of the Depression, and I had one brother, and it was more important that he be sent to school, and so I just finished my 8th grade.
I remember just one incident when a man came to the door asking for something to eat, and I thought, oh, this is terrible.
In addition to the times being hard for farmers, they were also fighting a drought where some of the corn would only be 3 or 4 inches high and hardly any grass or growing for cattle.
Many farmers joined the Wisconsin milk pool to protest low prices. The atmosphere soon turned violent. The county also felt the impact when in St. Cloud, a cheese factory was bombed. In 1932, politics took on a new look.
F. Ryan Duffy was the first and only U.S. Senator from Fond du Lac County. Duffy supported the repeal of Prohibition. He supported a shorter work week, and he wanted to help farmers, and he was in full support of the Democratic platform.
The times were ripe for a rekindling of the progressive movement begun by Fighting Bob La Follette. Led by his sons, the Wisconsin Progressive Party was formed in the city of Fond du Lac in 1934. New Deal programs were created by Franklin Roosevelt, so many in fact that they were known as the Alphabet Soup Projects.
There were many WPA projects in the library between the years 1937 and 1939. Local newspapers were indexed, and this is the project that was continued through the years and is been kept up to date.
When President Roosevelt was elected and came into office, things got better because my father was able to find a job with the WPA.
I joined the CC camps in 1939, and the reason I joined is because they sent $25 home every month to my folks, and they give us $5 to spend for whatever you needed.
People were searching for the lighter side of a most difficult time.
And we got an Atwater Kent radio, which was big stuff.
People would sing to be comforted, so to speak, instead of complaining.
When I was a young girl going to the movies during the Depression, that was really a nice thing because so many people were out of work and you needed entertainment to keep your spirits up.
In 1932, the use of the library reached the highest level it had ever achieved. In her report, Lila James, the library director for that year, wrote, "It is the Depression years
when people have little money to spend and are confused in their interpretation of the times, that the thinking group turns to libraries."
In the midst of hard times, a college was founded in Fond du Lac.
People do tend to wonder why Marian College was started in 1936. Here is this group of religious women that nobody was doing too well, and yet they start a college. Well, it goes back to educating the young sisters for the classroom.
Young nuns attending the public university were not allowed to wear their habits in the public school classrooms where they would be practice teaching. As if in answer to their prayers, Marian College opened its doors 9 months later. Fond du Lac County had weathered a great storm.
We weren't the richest, we weren't the poorest. We had clothes on our back, we had food on the table, and so as children or youngsters, what more could you ask for?
A depressed nation became a hopeful one. By 1940, both the county and nation were looking for a much brighter forecast.
Farming in Wisconsin in the 1940s was a very exciting time because we were just coming out of the Great Depression, and Wisconsin had become a leader in agriculture in the nation.
Unfortunately, that hopeful forecast would prove to be all too optimistic. For the cloud of war that had covered much of the world was now beginning to rain on American soil.
German news agency Transocean said today in a broadcast that the Allied invasion had begun.
With the nation at war, nearly 1 out of 10 of the county's residents served Uncle Sam, and being drafted was a strange new experience.
They asked you what branch of the service you would like to be in, and I said, well, I think I'd probably like the Army. I wasn't too concerned. I think the Army. And so he went over by some rubber stamps over here, and he picked up the Navy one and went, boing, you're in the Navy.
Rationing shaped the lives of every Fond du Lac County citizen. Sugar, automobiles, tires, gasoline, even shoes and typewriters were rationed. Victory gardens, war bonds, and V-mail were part of everyday life.
We tried to help with the war effort. We collected tin cans for the scrap metal drive, and we also went out and collected milkweed pods that were used instead of kapok in life jackets.
Back in 1943, when I graduated from high school, we had the opportunity then through the civil service to go to either Chicago or to New York to work. This was our contribution for the war effort.
Fond du Lac County made many contributions as well. Local industry built minesweeper tanks, parts for ships, and ammunition shells, while hundreds of men in the armed service received scientific training at Ripon College.
The largest hemp mill in the United States was located near Brandon, and 95% of the hemp that was used for making rope was grown in Fond du Lac and Dodge counties.
Power informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations.
When the war ended, a Fond du Lac County father wrote of his joy.
And the church bells were ringing and the fire department whistles was blowing, everyone out on the street. Well, right away I knew the war was over officially. Boy, what a relief it is to know
all our efforts and yours are not in vain. We are holding our celebration off until you all are home. Then the lid is off. I am writing to all my sons tonight, telling you that we are all well and ever so happy. I just can't tell, but I do know there won't be no more wars for at least our generation. It was so costly to all that it should be a lesson to anyone that tries to start one. So until we will be seeing you soon.
Lots of love, Pop.
With veterans returning, many of the women of Fond du Lac County who had replaced male workers during the war were forced to walk away from their jobs.
Following World War II, veterans were given their jobs back, and one veteran came back and I thought, I'm out of here, but they told me, no, not now. But not too long after that, the second veteran came back and they told me this is his job. So they said, now you're out of here.
With the war now over, the pleasures of the Fond du Lac County landscape could once again be enjoyed, particularly in the Kettle Moraine, where the Department of Forestry had purchased land for preservation and recreation. The time of relaxation was cut short, however, by a most powerful emotion: fear. The bomb, Korea, fear of communism, spread by Wisconsin's own Joe McCarthy.
It's hard to measure the strength of support because when McCarthy spoke in the public square in Ripon in the early 50s, he attracted one of the largest crowds that had ever been seen in the city.
Fear also spread with the polio epidemic, a disease that afflicted mostly children and promised no hope for a cure. But hope came in the form of the Salk vaccine. On May 6, 1954, police officers rushed the vaccine to the 11 centers in Fond du Lac County, and the second-grade students who received the experimental inoculation became the polio pioneers. Once again, the gathering place became an essential link with the rest of the growing state and nation. With a new superhighway that cut across Fond du Lac County in 1952. The 50s, booming in babies and buildings. In 1950 alone, the Fond du Lac County Register of Deeds did record business. Much had changed following the war, but one thing had not: people's appetite for entertainment. Who could have predicted the impact?
And with the turn of a dial, we were transported into a whole new world.
The Eagle has landed. President Kennedy died.
The 60s signaled reform, and education was at the forefront.
The changes that occurred in the 60s were brought about by the desire to provide more opportunities for students. And the way to do that was to maximize resources by bringing schools together by means of consolidation.
People began to see they had choices in all aspects of their lives, reminding them of their responsibilities to their communities as well as the environment. Concern over urban sprawl led the town of Auburn to pass its first permanent zoning ordinance in 1966 for the retention of natural beauty, citing Lady Bird Johnson's beautification program. For local industry, choice meant conflict, specifically conflict between labor and management. for the downsizing of America was beginning to make an impact for all involved.
The most significant change that in labor history in the 70s and 80s was when Ronald Reagan fired the air traffic controllers. This cut a pathway for corporate America to downsize.
For many residents, the defining choice of the decade was for or against the war, hawks or doves.
It was a blow to be drafted out of teaching. I certainly didn't expect this to happen, although I never, ever thought about going to Canada or to be a conscientious objector. I always felt that I had to serve my country and do what they asked.
The Ripon College campus was the scene of considerable protest over the Vietnam War, as were all college campuses in this period. Perhaps the high point of protest on the part of the students came when General Maxwell Taylor visited the college and spoke to the student body generally. And then as Taylor walked through the students, they all turned their back on him, one after another, so that he got the message. But then, after he was inside, the students quietly went indoors and sat down and listened to his speech very politely. Taylor said it was the nicest protest that he'd ever experienced.
Fond du Lac County extended a helping hand to Hmong refugees who supported the U.S. during the war years. They became the county's new immigrants.
The 1960s and 1970s are a time of very real change for women. And one of the most dramatic changes took place in education. Up until this time, women made up about 35 to 40% of the student body on college campuses across the country. Today, it is more than half. There are now more women than men in college. But during that period, the 60s and 70s, women were flocking onto college campuses to get educations in areas that had previously been closed to them.
It was a time in which women were investing in their future.
An investment that proved itself over and over again in the years ahead. Roll tape.
There are no doors we cannot unlock.
I decided to run for public office because I was interested in genealogy, and through genealogy I had learned how to read land records and knew about vital records, and I had also spent a lot of time in the Register of Deeds office. So in 1982 it was a good opportunity for me. My husband and I had just changed our business, and it was just a really good chance to campaign. So that's the year I decided to run for the Register of Deeds office.
For local politicians, changes in the county landscape became one of their greatest challenges.
The most significant change in the 1980s and 90s in Fond du Lac County has been the dramatic increase in the county's economy and the economy statewide. It has put significant pressure on the areas, in the rural areas in particular, as a result of urban sprawl. Lots of new homes because of the increasing population as a result of more jobs and the additional money available to the individuals to build those homes. That has put pressure on the environment. Our green space is being drastically and quickly used up, and our road system is being heavily taxed as well.
Today there are a lot more complex issues than ever before because we have a lot more activity, people moving into the country, so that you have the commingling of farming and urban developments. And just by that very nature, you're going to have somewhat of a clash in terms of needs. And that's one of the primary problems that each township has to resolve in their own fashion, is how to make the marriage of both of those groups of people work well.
Mortar and stone, old versus new, difficult decisions for a new generation.
In 1979, I voted to tear down the Fond du Lac County Courthouse. The reasons that I did and others did is we needed the space where the courthouse was sitting. It was an old building. There had been a substantial increase in cost of the project, if we had to build the new building and remodel the old. However, 20 years later, I have an entirely different opinion. I think what I voted to do was to tear down a local treasure we can never replace.
Grassroots efforts proved successful when the Friends of the Old Eden Town Hall united to save their local landmark.
I'm sort of reminded of a quote of Alex Haley, the author of Roots. He said one time that when an old person dies, it's like a library is burned. So we felt that it was important that we expand this idea of preserving the town hall and making a museum.
It's not just buildings. We're really looking at an entire landscape, because on that landscape is a cultural imprint.
Preservation of cultural heritage has been at the core of the Brothertown Indians' efforts to regain tribal status.
The Brothertown heritage has been preserved because they have the feeling of closeness and tradition and customs, and they want to keep those alive. That's why it's important for us to have this tribal status. We want to retain our heritage and our ancestry and our roots.
Searching for our roots has become a national pastime. Thousands of researchers travel each year to Fond du Lac County in search of their cultural heritage. And thousands of visitors continue to travel to Fond du Lac County, many in search of the Miracle Mile, where the sale of lottery tickets has given birth to many instant millionaires.
An environment so full of promise,
so full of life,
where waters carried the weary, the adventurous, and the determined to a new frontier.
A gathering place unlike any other.
Many of the early trails probably really originated as mammoth migratory
Dear friends, I am glad to hear you are pleased with the country.
They needed to own the land, and of course the Indian feeling was that no one owned the land.
Flamboyant entrepreneur John Macy to bring the railroad to Fond du Lac County.
Suffered many casualties during the Civil War.
Wisconsin dairy producers to really start to
birth
become
of the Republican
a dairy
Party.
state.
The Democrats still remain as the majority.
African-American community.
Dramatic examples of the changing roles of women at that time.
Had an important economic
The Depression
impact.
years were a sad time for us.
Right away, I knew the war was over officially.
World War II veterans were given their
Scene of
jobs
considerable protest over the Vietnam War.
70s are a time of very real change for
There's been
women.
the dramatic increase in the county's economy and the
Today there
economy
are a lot
statewide.
more complex issues than ever before.
He said one time that when an old person dies, it's like a library is burned.
Throughout history, many have searched for and profited from the many miracles that Fond du Lac County has to offer. Miracles rediscovered in different ways by each new generation.
The real miracle in Fond du Lac County, in my opinion, has little to do with the sale of lottery tickets. When the Cheyenne send their religious holy men in to pin down the center of creation here, because the story on the land is so unique, I feel that the fact that we can find evidence of that here after many thousands of years, that's the real miracle.
If history has taught us anything about this unique area, it is this. There will always be people looking for a place to live, work, play, prosper, but most of all, gather.
Major funding for the gathering place is provided by the Fond du Lac County Historical Society, dedicated to preserving the treasures of the past and educating residents and visitors on our exciting history. Major support also provided by Giddings & Lewis, great machines, great service, great people. JC Video Productions, offering quality, full in-house production surpassed only by your satisfaction. A tradition of integrity, innovation, and involvement, Mid-States Aluminum Corporation, progress through people. RB Royal Industries, a manufacturer providing good job opportunities for Fond du Lac area residents since 1942. Esther Blakely, in memory of Don and Ren Blakely, who tirelessly dedicated themselves to the historical preservation of Fond du Lac County. And funded in part by the Wisconsin Humanities Council and the National Endowment for the Humanities, and also funded by Alliant Energy, Fond du Lac Area Foundation, ALJ, CAJ, Williams Fund, and Burkholz Community Fund, News Talk 1450, KFIZ, Mercury Marine, Michael's Pipeline, Society Insurance, Video Age, along with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, United of Wisconsin, Northeastern Regional Service Center, and National Exchange Bank and Trust.